Hello and welcome to this video tutorial where I'm going to show you how to sew the Jakob jacket without bias tape. Many of you requested it, and sewing the jacket without bias tape is way easier and also way faster. I would recommend to open the main tutorial as well, because I won't explain the basic steps like cutting, pockets, materials and so on. I would just go further into the necessary steps to sew Jakob without bias tape. In order to sew Jakob without bias tape, we have to make one little pattern modification, which is basically only adding a little extra seam allowance of 1 centimeter at all the red marked lines here. Usually we're going to add bias tape, but as we are going to stitch lining and outer jacket together, we will have to add an extra seam allowance of 1 centimeter at all the red marked edges here. This is the overview for the version with color, but if you're sewing the jacket with round neck, these are the relevant edges. To make clear what I mean, I have filmed how I cut out my front piece. I'm sewing the version with color, and I've cut with an extra seam allowance of 1 centimeter at the front edge and also the hemline. All the rest is being cut without any extra seam allowance, and the changes apply to both the main and also the lining jacket. Once you made the pattern adjustment, you can follow the original sewing tutorial. There is only one thing to consider, which is to leave a turning gap of 15 to 20 centimeters at one of both side seams at your lining jacket. I've put 2 pins right there as markings, and when I stitch, I will basically stitch until the first pin, then backstitch, and then continue sewing at the other pin. I have also filmed this part so that you know what I mean. Here I'm stitching right until the first pin, which is basically my marking, and then I will backstitch and continue sewing at the other pin. You can now follow the original sewing tutorial. The only things to consider are the extra seam allowance and also the turning gap in one of the side seams of the lining jacket. And once you've finished the outer and also lining jacket, you can come back to this tutorial so we can sew both jackets together. Once you have finished your main and lining jacket, place your main jacket with wrong fabric side facing out and your lining jacket with right fabric side facing out. And now the lining jacket is being put into the main jacket so that right fabric sides of both jackets are facing. You can ignore the sleeves for now, and we are going to pin both jackets together along the front edge, the hemline, and also the neckline. I always pin so that at the hemline and also the neckline or the upper edge of my collar, the lining is approximately 4 millimeters further inside. This way we can gain some extra length in the lining, because lining jackets are usually a little bit longer than the outer jackets. I'm pinning so that the front edges are exactly laying flush, and at the hemline I will pin the lining jacket 4 millimeters further inside, as you can see here. And I will do the same thing at the upper edge of my collar or the neckline as well. Here I will pin the lining 4 millimeters further inside to gain some extra length for the lining. Once you've pinned everything in place, we're going to stitch all the way around, as my finger shows, with a regular straight stitch and the 1 centimeter seam allowance. Next, I'm going to clip into the seam allowances at all of the curves, basically at the front edges at the top and bottom, and I will stop approximately 2 millimeters before the seam so I don't catch it. Now you can turn the jacket through the turning gap right side out, form the corners out nicely, and you can also slide the lining sleeves into the main sleeves. Now we have to sew the sleeve hems together, and the lining sleeve is also laying inside the main sleeve. And now take the main sleeve right at the seam and fold it few centimeters to the wrong fabric side and hold it like this. And now I will repeat this step with my lining sleeve as well. Right at the seam, I will fold it few centimeters to the wrong fabric side like this. And then you can hold both sleeve hems together like this. And now with your other hand, go through the turning gap right until the sleeve hem, and then hold both sleeve hems together like here, and then pull out the sleeve. Make sure not to lose any of the two sleeves. Once outside, it kind of looks like two arms are shaking hands, and right where we are holding them, they are laying together with right fabric sides facing. Also, the sleeve seams should meet. And now you can step by step pin both sleeve hems together all the way around. I would recommend to go step by step and make sure to pin only 2 layers of fabric, and also to pin with right fabric sides facing. And also here I will pin the lining hem 4 millimeters further inside to make sure we are getting some extra length for the sleeve lining too. This is what it should look like, and now we're going to stitch all the way around with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Make sure just to stitch 2 fabric layers together. This is what it will look like, and now you can turn your sleeve right side out again and repeat all these steps with the other sleeve too. Next, we're going to top stitch all the edges. I would never skip this step because it will give the jacket a really nice and professional finish. And I'm basically pinning all the way around at all edges, and I'm pinning so that the lining jacket is laying 4 millimeters further inside to make sure that it won't be visible from the outside, as you can see here. And I also pin at the sleeve hem with the lining laying 4 millimeters further inside here as well. Next it's time to top stitch. I'm stitching with a regular straight stitch and a little seam allowance of 0.5 centimeter, but you can stitch with any distance to the edge that you like. And I'm stitching all the way around at all the edges and also at the sleeve hem. Now we only have to close the turning gap, and here basically fold both open edges 1 centimeter to the wrong fabric side and then pin both sides together. Usually if you pull at the turning gap, it will automatically lay like this, and then you can just pin it together along the whole gap so that no open edge remains. And once you've pinned everything in place, it's time to stitch. And here you can stitch with a little distance to the edge of approximately 2 to 3 millimeters. And this was the last step of this additional tutorial. You can now go back to the original tutorial to finish the jacket with snap fasteners. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial and that it was helpful.